We are going to learn how to perform an outbound call with ASTPP. This is our ASTPP portal, and in our ASTPP portal we have very simple way to make an outbound call. First, we are going to show you one very simple diagram for outbound call flow. In the diagram we can see the customer, provider, rate group, origination rates, gateway, trunk, and termination rates. So these are the configurations we have to configure in our ASTP for making an outbound call. For creating a customer, we have to go to the account section, and on the account sections we have customers, and from the customers we have to click on customers. Once our page redirect to the customers page, we will get the option create customer. We can create a customer by clicking on create customer, where we need to fill up with some details like first name and email ID that should be specific for each and every customer and the provider. So for the testing purpose, right now I'm going to create a customer with the name of Mike and email ID. I'm going to provide here mike@gmail.com. And the most important thing in our ASTP, we must have to fill up those details where we can see the star mark. So once we complete with all these details, we have to click on save for creating a customer. So now we have successfully created a customer. As we can see, we have successfully created a customer. So now we have to create a provider. For create a provider, we have the option create provider. By clicking on it, we can create a provider account. So now I'm going to create a provider account here. We must have to give a specific email ID, as I already said. And by clicking on save option, we are successfully creating our provider. So we have successfully created our customer and provider account here. Now we have to create a rate group for them. So for the rate group, we have the section tariff, and from the tariff we will get the option rate groups. And from the rate groups we can create the rate group here. For creating a rate group, we must have to give a name, initial increment, and the increment. And we have the other option called routing type and the trunks that I will explain you later on the video. So we have to click on save for creating the rate group. So now we have successfully created our rate group here. So after creating the rate group, we have to create the origination rates for the customer. By clicking on origination rates, from the tariff section we can create a origination rate here, where we can see the rate group already selected by default because we have just made it rate groups here, name as test 1. The code here is the country code for which customer want to make a call. Suppose customer want to make a call for United States, so we can put here 1 for the country code. So for now, by click on save, we have successfully created our origination rate. So after origination rate, we have to create our gateway. For creating a gateway, we will have the section carriers. From the carriers, we have the option gateways, and by clicking on the gateways, we can get the option create, and from that we can create a gateway. First, we have to provide a name of the gateway. Then the second field, we have the SIP profile. And the third thing is mandatory, the proxy. And here in the proxy, we have to put the IP where we want ASTPP has to route the call. And this IP you will get from your provider end. And remaining options, those are not mandatory, and we can now save for creating the gateway. So we have successfully created the gateway here. After the gateway, we have to create the trunk. From the same section, from the carriers, we can get the trunk option, and from the trunk we can create the trunk here, and same way we have to provide the trunk name. And by default, as we have only one provider right now in our ASTPP, so by default it is selected. So the gateway name is also by default selected here, because as we only have one gateway in our ASTPP right now. So I'm going to save these details for creating this trunk. After creating the trunk, we have to create the termination rates for the provider. So for the termination rates, on the same section of carriers, we can get the option here. As we already created a origination rate, so same way we can create a termination rate here. We have to give the code, the country code, as we already have given to the customer for the origination rate, the United States country code. The same code I'm going to put here for making this termination rate. So now we have created our customer, provider, then the rate groups, origination rates, gateway, trunk, and the termination rates for the provider. After creating all the things that we have on the diagram, now for the call, first we have to refill the customer account. So now our complete outbound call flow for the ASTPP is, we have the customer right here. After the customer, we have rate groups and the origination rates. In that origination rate, we have to assign the rate group we have created, and once we have assigned the rate group in the origination rate, we have to assign that rate group into the customer account. After assigning the rate group, as we have the gateway which we have made so that ASTPP can route the call to your provider, and this gateway we have to assign to the trunk, into the trunk. And once we assign this gateway into the trunk, we have to assign the provider that we have made before with the customer. So we have to assign that provider into the trunk, and after creating the trunk, we have to assign this trunk to the termination rate, and at the end we have to assign the trunk into the rate group so that customer call get route into the trunk. So we have three routing types here. We can select one and we can select the trunk, and we can save it. So after creating the rate group, as we already mentioned, after all this, we finally has to assign that rate group to the customer. And by registering the SIP device with any soft phone, we can make the outbound call in our ASTPP. So this is our complete outbound.